GameDay Won the Show is brought to you by Veolia and our friends at White Plains Hospital. The 2024 football season, it's here. I mean, it's a couple days away, and nobody's more excited than I am. I don't know than my man who's joining me right here tonight, who is Frankie Langella from Fam Sports. And Franks, thanks so much for coming on and joining our GameDay Won the Show, brought to you by Veolia and White Plains Hospital. I know you've been busy, man, getting ready for the season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very busy time for obviously the coaches, the players, the schools, but also covering the sport as well. So thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to talk football.
No problem. And you're a guy who I don't, people go and watch games all the time, but very few people go back and watch tape, right? And we call it tape, even though it's not tape anymore. We go back and watch the tape and watch the film and learn about the players, learn about what makes them good. And I think that's something that I've always admired from what you guys do with Fam is go and rewatch and you critique, you find the bright spots, you identify things that I think only coaches really can understand, but kind of make it open to a broader audience, which is something that's very cool, very unique. So I applaud you guys for doing that. So now we're going to talk about the 2024 season. We start with Class AA, obviously, on this show. And, just a quick rewind to 2023. Before the season, I said Arlington. During the season, I said Arlington. Before the playoffs, before the championship game, I said Arlington. I even walked out of Arlington that night and thought to myself, was Carmel, I mean, they were better that night for sure, but are they the better team overall? And then I got like this greater appreciation for them, watching them go through the state playoffs. So last year, I think we were very lucky in Section 1 having two teams that were as good as Arlington and Carmel. But when you look back at 2023, Carmel was clearly the best team the entire time, and maybe we didn't know it. Is that what it was?
Well, what's great about Carmel and what we've seen over the last couple years is after the COVID year, they had this really loaded team, probably some of the most talented team that Carmel's had in 20 plus years. And under Take, they ran through the league all the way to a state championship. The following year, when my father went over as a defensive coordinator, they lost a lot of seniors. So everyone around the league started to think, is Carmel going to come back to the group? They go on to win the section title, right? Then again, this time around, we're thinking the same thing. Okay, they got to be taking a step back at some point. And then obviously Coach K has to step down for medical reasons. They get beat up by Arlington in week 2. And it's like, okay, this is where Carmel is going to start falling back. And that just never happened. So it's in a tremendous streak that they've run on. 34-3 the last 3 years for Carmel. And it's just, were they the best team through the entire season? No. I think Arlington was. But the great thing about football is you don't have to be the best team throughout the entire season. You have to be the best team on that day, and that was for sure Carmel.
They were excellent. Only losses other than the Arlington loss, came to a couple private schools, which is a sensitive subject we'll talk about another time. But so is this the year they take a step back? We'll start with our favorite right now in Class AA. You still like Carmel?
I do. I think Carmel is a favorite. Obviously, Arlington has a lot of kids coming back as well. They lost some major key people, so is Carmel, but I still think that they are a favorite. I think they've earned that. They have to replace a lot of guys, especially up front. No returning starting offensive linemen from last year's group, so that's obviously a big thing. They have to replace their quarterback, and I know I watched some of the interview at Media Day. You saw some of the new faces that are going to have to step up into that role. One of the faces, though, that is returning is Tristan Worley, and he's arguably the best running back in Section 1. So you have that guy coming, right? And you also have 4 starters coming back on the defensive side, which was another strong defense. So there's a couple new faces to keep an eye on. I mean, you have Teddy Galbraith, the tight end, big kid. King Mercer is going to be moving to the offensive line. He was a stud on a defensive line. Alton Shala is another big offensive lineman. Going to have to step into that role. But you have some guys that I think could explode in Brian McGorry, the quarterback, Tristan Worley at the running back spot, and defensively, a guy, Tamba Casal, at the linebacker spot. Keep an eye on him. He's somebody I think that you interviewed at the Media Day. Is another talented young man that made some plays last year at the linebacker spot, and he moved around in different areas at defensive end, linebacker. These are some names to keep an eye on. Carmel's super talented. Sometimes it's like, you got to replace all these starters, but it's because they were seniors that were ahead of them. So they could still be very talented. We just don't know about them. And I still think that they are a favorite.
I agree. I would put them, I would be dumb to pick against them at this point, right? So it's the last 2 years of them. But, one thing that Tristan Worley last year, He was a great running back. Yes, he trucked defenders. He was such a good kick returner, and I think that is really underrated in terms of in his skill set, because you hear about him as a back. If they're going to put him back on kickoff and kick returns again, I mean, what he did in the state playoffs was special, and he just changes games. And I think you're right. I think he is. I agree with you. The best running back in the area, maybe. I mean, it's really hard to find another guy who's got the complete package and is as tough. He's a farm boy, which is something that I learned.
I did. I saw that. Yep.
So, all right. So now, one thing I will say is, Arlington and Carmel last year we felt were not only head and shoulders above, but there was a good distance between them and the next pack of teams. I don't think there's that same gap this year between the favorite and the top contenders. You mentioned Arlington. Who else do you like?
Yeah, so a couple contenders to keep an eye on. And the first one, I saw the polls done at Media Day, and it was Carmel Arlington 1 and 2, both on the coaches and players. But another team I think that could surprise folks as one of those contenders is Mamaroneck. And again, they've had a strong last couple of years as well. They've gotten at least 6 wins the last 3 years. 2 years ago, they were 9-1, went to the section title game. But this team that's coming in, they have 7 starters returning on offense, 4 offensive linemen. Now, they do have to replace their quarterback, who was a key factor in their offense last year. But again, this was the 4th-ranked offense in points scored in the regular season, bringing back 7 guys and 4 on the offensive line. I know, Kevin, that you've watched. The biggest thing when you see Arlington and Carmel kind of dominating is up front. And if you can challenge them up front or compete with them up front, you have a really good chance here. And so 7 starters on offense, 7 starters on defense, a lot of veterans coming back. So to me, Mamaroneck could be someone that could really contend with them. I think has to be up high on people's boards as someone who can dethrone Arlington or Carmel this season as one of them. I don't know if you have comments. I have another contender.
The Mamaroneck thing to me has always been, Mamaroneck was this close to beating Carmel in that section championship game. They were a play away. Yeah. And remember, they were getting kind of run off the field in the first half of that game a couple of years ago. Yeah. Then they had the explosive plays. They got back into the game, and they're right there. And then obviously the interception ended the game. But they just couldn't match up front. I think this team is good enough up front now, finally. And you look at a Mamaroneck squad, it's always been about if they can push people around. Defensively, they're very good. Mika Barry-Tuez is awesome. I think they have a lot of good players returning. And I feel with Anthony Vitti as the coach, what he's done with this program, eventually they're going to break through, and I think this might be one of their best opportunities. But there's a team in Rockland County that I think is so similar to them in terms of what they have, and really what might hold them back is depth. And who do you like next?
Yeah, I mean, my next contender to look at is Suffern. And this is a team that lost to Carmel in the semis last season. And to me, one of the 2 teams in this league, this power league they call the North League, bringing back their quarterback. So a lot of teams are looking for their next quarterback. Suffern is bringing back their quarterback. They're also bringing back 6 total starters on offense, 2 on the offensive line. And they're bringing back one of the best backs in the section. We talk about Tristan. Jeff Joseph is another guy who is extremely impressive when you watch them. Super versatile guy who can run the football, catch the ball. He also did some blocking. So this is a guy who's well-versed. He can run a lot of these. They love to attack the tackles on the offensive line. He's a guy who does it really well. He stretches the defense out and then finds lanes, and he's a glider. He gets to that second level. He takes these long glides and just pulls away from people. So he's really good. You mentioned the quarterback in Mason Palumbo. He's going to be such a key factor. I know there were some growing pains as he went through the season. If he could take that next step forward, like I said, it's hard to find. When you have a veteran quarterback, you really are ahead of the game with some of these other teams trying to find that quarterback and meld that quarterback. So he's a huge part of it. And a couple other guys to keep an eye on. Shane Stolkup, I know he was at the media day. Really important 2-way offensive lineman for them. Had to move to the tackle spot last year. Was really strong when he played, but defensively at the defensive end spot, someone who could cause havoc on both sides of the ball. Finnegan Mitchell, another guy, calls a lot of plays on the back end. They do have to replace some guys on the skill position. And defensively, 4 starters coming back out of 11 on a really strong defense. But Suffern is somebody who, again, can challenge somebody up front and have playmakers at each level of their offense and defense.
I agree. When we said about Werlau, we just said he was the best running back in the section. He's probably the best running back, right? In terms of that. But yeah. I would take Jeff Joseph as an all-around threat. Line up on the outside, line up in the slot, have him in motion, do anything with him. Coaches dream of players like these 2 guys. They would be really good teammates. They would complement each other extremely well. But you're right. Jeff Joseph is a special player. And we saw it last year when their playoff win and they go to Carmel in the semis, and he just was he's scary. He's a defensive nightmare, defensive coach's nightmare. I just feel like when you talk about these teams, and North Rockland is lurking, right? When I look at what Coach James Hickey's done, kind of rebuilding, kind of getting North Rockland back to where it once was. It's really hard to do that, and obviously. The coach, New Rochelle's in the same position, right? You have another young coach coming through, Ray Rhett, who's trying to just get them back to where they were, and it's a lot of a burden. But I feel like Hickey's a little bit ahead of schedule with this group, and they have skill talent galore. So when you look at North Rockland, they're a team that they can line up on any given play. They're going to have they're like a highlight reel waiting to happen team. Is it going to equate to wins? Is it going to equate to playoff wins? I'm not sure, but with that group they have something special there cooking.
Yeah, I mean, North Rockland was kind of that team that was close to my contenders list, and they could absolutely be that. Now, they're returning 6 starters on defense. That defensive secondary that they have could be the best arguably in the section, with Javon Lawrence, who committed to Syracuse, King St. Fleur, Jaquan Johnson. The secondary is loaded. The question that I have is on the offensive line, right? 1 returning starter on the offensive line. And they're one of those teams that are looking for that quarterback. So they have a bunch of skill guys. Can they get the quarterback, that orchestrator, that can help them against these big physical defenses like Carmel, like Arlington, like Suffern, and potentially Mamaroneck? So that's kind of my question on North Rockland, because Coach Hickey's a very good offensive coach. He's looking for that quarterback to take him over the top, and I'm interested to see if they could do that.
So it is going to be a very good Class AA. With John J. Fishel is going to be, no easy out for anybody. Scarsdale's in there as well. So there's a lot of good teams. Tell me who your sleepers are. I think the first team, we should talk about. I'm excited about the Spring Valley Ramapo merge. Merge programs typically don't get too many people too excited. These are 2 former bitter rivals. They're becoming one team, and I thought the energy that they had at me today was pretty good.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And, there was so much conversation in the offseason about this Power League and North League, which is going to get, I think, 6 of the playoff teams out of it. Mm-hmm. The other league, you're getting 2, right? So you're really competing for those top 2 spots. And when I looked at sleepers, I'm thinking, you know what? Everyone's talking about the North League. The sleeper teams are going to come from that other league. And the merger from East Ramapo, to me, is a very interesting one. Not so, because obviously you're bringing in a pool of a lot of talent from 2 schools, but also the veteran coaching staff. You spoke with Coach Bullock, who's been a coach for a long time in that area, and the defensive coordinator and Coach Delva, who is the head coach of Spring Valley, an aggressive style defense. So to me, they're returning 7 starters on offense, 6 starters on defense. Anthony Mack is someone to definitely keep an eye on. He's probably not a well-known name, but defensively, he'll line up at D-tackle, defensive end, linebacker. He is a versatile defensive Swiss Army knife for them, and he's always around the football, makes big-time plays. Eli Pierre on the defensive side, too. Very aggressive linebacker, smaller guy, but this is another team which I call a sleeper because they could be a contender if they can figure things out at the quarterback spot. That's one thing I spoke with Coach in the offseason. That's something that they were trying to figure out. It's going to really dictate what kind of offense they become is at the quarterback spot, and they want someone who could be a manager because they have a lot of talented skill guys. They have those skill guys to compete with the other teams. It's can they find the quarterback, the orchestrator, and on the offensive line, can they figure that out? But they're bringing back a lot of starters, so that's got to be very exciting for the program.
And a team with a good offensive and defensive line is Ossining. Now, Ossining was a team that makes the playoffs last year, and now it's all about making that next step. They do graduate some very good skill talent, but Eden Moore's a nice player to kind of build around. I watched. I'm not you. I don't have the idol. I don't have like a coach's son or a coach's mentality. But I could just every once in a while see something on. I'm like, who is this kid? And that was Eden Moore last year when I'm watching some of his highlights. I mean, he's a special player that I don't think people know much about.
Absolutely, and he is, in my opinion, the best pass rusher out of everyone I've watched. In especially AA, he's the best pure pass rusher who can beat you with speed, and he got stronger from the year prior. Like you saw 2 years ago when he came up, you saw something there. He had some zip to him, but then last year watching the tape, you saw the strength, like his ability to now use some power in his rushing, and he's able to again chase plays from the backside. Teams really have to focus when anyone's playing Ossining. You can tell by the way they scheme things up. Their focus is on Eden Moore, number 1 priority. So that's obviously a huge thing. It opens things up for the rest of his teammates. And Ossining bringing back 9 defensive starters, Kevin, that's what to me can make things really open up on why they're a sleeper to me. So 9 defensive starters coming back. They obviously lose a tremendous running back in LaFaro, who was so key to their success in the playoff run. But they're returning 3 offensive linemen that can help that next running back. 6 offensive starters coming back on the offensive side of the ball. They got into that playoffs. They beat North Rockland in a really tough game to get in. If with all these starters coming back and the offensive line work and Aiden Moore on the defensive side, they can maybe push that to that top 2 spots in that league.
Absolutely. They beat North Rockland. North Rockland lost 14-6 to Carmel last year. Carmel goes to the state champ. So they were there. They were on the right day. They're there. It's all about putting it together for an 8-week season. So, but Ossining, again, is, I think, very much, as you said, in the mix to make some noise. I don't know if they're winning a championship, but definitely in the mix to make some noise. They're probably, when you were in high school, they probably were they were a top team in the section probably back then, right?
Yeah, they were competitive. They were. And I know it's been, for Ossining, and I saw you mentioned on Media Day with them that, it's kind of been a up and down last few years. I know they were hit hard when the COVID went down. They're 21 and 23 over the last 5 years, right? So I was hovering around the 500 mark. But, last year to me, it was a real step forward, beating upper echelon team like a North Rockland. I think that's where you make your mark when these teams trying to get back into it. If you can beat the upper echelon teams. Right, not the smaller teams or the teams that are weaker than you. It's the teams that you can beat that are probably bigger and better than you. Those are the landmark moments for the team.
So we know all who the Section Super 11 guys are and who the top players are. We mentioned a lot of them so far, but I will agree. When we talked about players, players to watch, we'll finish our 3 players to watch. I love Nas Fields. I thought he was so good last year watching him when I was doing the all-section video, and I'm like, man, some of these plays he make, and obviously I'm not watching the entire game, but some of his highlights are really good. Joe Venice comes in now as the Yonkers Force coach, and really could change things for him. Who else do you like other than Nas?
Yeah, Nazir Fields obviously at the quarterback spot. Running backs to watch. We mentioned about Werlew and Jeff Joseph. They're great running backs. So I'm going to keep an eye on Nick Sexton from White Plains. I mean, this young man. He had over 700 yards rushing, 300-yard receiving, so well over 1,000 yards total. And he can help you in the running game as a returner, as a receiver. He is White Plains' best player. I know that they've struggled the last couple of years, but if you just focus in on this young man, he really pops off the tape to me. And I think he can set up, if White Plains is going to turn things around, it's going to be off the spark and back of this young man. Again, he was a hard worker in the weight room. I saw a clip of him, putting up 275 as a personal best, and then do a standing backflip right after making it, right? He oozes the athleticism and energy, and that translates to the field. So it's such a super impressive young man to watch at the running back and wide receiver spot.
And Christian Roan of New Rochelle. New Rochelle, again, I just feel like it's going to come back around for the program as an offensive defensive lineman. He had a good presence to him at Media Day. I don't know if you watched that one. Who else do you like there? Other skill guys.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Roan is another, when you look back on the prototypical New Rochelle defensive lineman, he is that kind of guy who's big, strong, and a quick first step, and that's what he brings. But another guy, keep an eye, I mentioned him earlier when we were talking North Rockland, King St. Fleur, the safety. This young man, dynamic, versatile. He had over 60 tackles, 3 INTs, 3 pass deflections last year. He's one of those safeties that I love because you can put him in the box and he acts like a linebacker. You can send him on stunts, and then he can play at the high safety spot. Where he can read the quarterback and make plays on the football. This is a guy, again, that really talented North Rockland secondary. Probably no other names more, but this guy, when you watch the tape, is kind of the guy that stirs the pot on the back end of that defense, and he's going to be super important this year.
All right, before we wrap up here, who makes the section championship? What 2 teams, and who wins?
Always tough. It's always tough to pick against Carmel and Arlington, right? So to me, we know that there's multiple three-peats going into this year, and Carmel is one of them. And I hate doing this against it as someone who's coached there previously.
Dude, I can't even tell you I was doing this.
It's hard to do it. It's hard to bet against them. I know they're going to use this against me, and that's okay. But I do think you're going to see a passing of the guard this year. And my pick who's going to be in the championship game is going to be Arlington and Mamaroneck.
Okay. And who wins? I'm giving mine, so we're both going to be in on this.
I know. This is a tough one for me. I battled it for a long, long period, but...
Well, let me ask you a question. Are you going to make a prediction on your own shows on Fam Sports?
I am.
Okay, then that's perfect. We're going to tease it for that. I want people to go and watch Fam Sports and watch and wait for Frankie's pick here to who's going to win the second championship. I got the finals out of you.
That's a good tease. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to go North Rockland and Mamaroneck. And I'm going to go, man, it's tough. I'm going to go Mamaroneck to win the second championship. That's going to be my pick this year. I feel like they're due for breakthrough. But man, it is so hard. I might even have Carmel in the championship, which is kind of crazy to me. But I do feel like this is a bit of a transition year, a little bit in Section 1 Class AA. I think we're going to see some upsets. I would be shocked if any team goes undefeated in the regular season. I think the playoffs are going to where things play out. I'll take the veteran group of Mamaroneck, and I think North Rockland's got a lot of talent. So I think those two make it to the championship. If you want to find out Frankie's pick, go on, watch his shows on Fam Sports. And Frank, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you playing along, having a little fun here. Don't listen to people. Are going to get upset at your picks. I mean, come on, we're so far past that.
They do, but it's all great. I love when they use it as motivation, or they use it as a rallying cry. I love that stuff. I know Lowhud gets a lot of crap too, but you know what? It's all fun as long as it's respectful, which it is so far. That's always fun.
So far. All right, Frank Langella, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We'll be back with our Class A show in a little bit. GameDay Won the Show is brought to you by Veolia and our friends at White Plains Hospital.